Welcome to Season 2, Episode 37 of Comic Book Nation, the official podcast of Comicbook.com. I am your host, Kofi Outlaw, and today we're just keeping the crew tight. It's Matt Aguilar.
What up?
Janelle Wheeler.
Hey, everybody.
And obviously we're coming to you guys at a really interesting time where I'm not even sure how many people feel like dipping into something like this right now, today. But then again, on the other hand, we also know there might be a lot of people looking for just this kind of thing to take their minds off, the world crumbling and whatnot. So we thought we'd be here today and kind of do what we do to try to help you guys, and because there's a lot of ways to help. And so just to get into something that kind of does bring people together, these fandoms, geek culture has been known as a, great unifier for many, many good reasons, even with some of the bad stuff that we have to go through. So we talk about some stuff that brings us together, makes us laugh, makes us happy. And in this kind of edition of the show, we're also going to do a special thing, considering how stressful things are right now. We take a minute and kind of roasted some good vibes. And so we're going to do some kind of look backs at good vibe moments in geekdom that really meant something to us, where people were kind of brought together by the things they love in fandom. And we'll do that little retrospective. But we also have some things to talk about because the news is still going, even if it's at a trickle. So we got to talk about what's happening on the Batwoman front with that show. Tiger King is not quite done yet. Rick and Morty just ended, and we got to talk about that. Space Force is here, not the government agency, but the new Netflix comedy that we are going to be reviewing. And
that's awesome.
Moon Knight is making trouble in the Marvel Universe. Jim's not here to answer for him, but we are going to talk about that too. So kind of a nice show that we can, like I said, help soak in some good vibes. So let's get started. All right, right at the top, let's talk about Batwoman. So Batwoman, the Arrowverse show, had a major shakeup when star Ruby Rose announced that she was leaving after season 1. Basically, she just kind of moved on. We haven't still heard like the full breakdown on this, but all signs point to her just the wear and tear of doing a TV show like that, but literally and figuratively in her case, with the nearly life-altering injury she suffered, to just the demanding schedule, to just, the fandom, the backlash, all the negativity, some of that. She just moved on, and so they were going to recast the character of Kate Kane, Batwoman, for season 2. And there were some pretty good kind of nominations. The what's her name from Krypton was a great thing that we were all kind of looking at. But now there's kind of a fly in the ointment that's a strange twist to this story, where it seems that now the CW is taking a different approach to all this. And instead of recasting Kate Kane, they're basically maybe going to be looking at creating a new character to kind of take over the Batwoman mantle in season 2. And it's kind of it's from a casting call that popped up on Reddit. So it's not like 100% official, but it seems to be leaning this way. And it's a new character that's, what's her name? Ryan Wilder. And the casting call is basically, she's likable, messy. She's goofy and untamed. She's nothing like Kate Kane. And with no one to keep, she spent years on the wrong side of the law, doing drug running, dodging, Gotham City cops, and, kind of making her way in the underworld that way. And she's a dangerous, she's also LGBTQ plus. She's athletic, raw, passionate, fallible, all this stuff. So she's kind of, basically, it's kind of like the Jason Todd of Batwoman, right? Like, this is what this sounds like. This is just like...
Yeah, I love the sound of this. And I love that they're doing that. I think it's great that, instead of trying to replace someone that fans fell in love with, they're just hopefully going to create another person for fans to latch onto and really care about.
So you are in favor of this? Which is
I am. I like that because I never like it. Even if the character isn't the greatest, whenever you just like outright replace someone, it's an awkward transition. I think it's just hard to process. And I really love the idea of a new character. And by the sound of this one, she sounds really almost even like nerdy, but like kind of, I don't know, edgy at the same time. It just sounds really cool. I want to know more about this character for sure.
Matt, as a kind of DC Comics expert on the show, and particularly a Batwoman fan, how do you feel about this?
Well, I'm not as positive as Janelle.
Surprise.
I'm not as positive. But I love that, and I feel like you are going to get both camps here. For me personally, I feel like the only reason you do something like this is because you think at some point Ruby would come back, whether that's a permanent thing or as a cameo deal. So you want to leave that opportunity open, because that would be a big ratings draw at some point. If she did want to come back as the character, you write her out and then leave it open. I mean, for me, this show is about Batwoman, and Batwoman is Kate Kane. So for me, it's like kind of hard to, we're just gonna put another, like, that's not what I'm watching this show for. It's different if it was like 4 seasons in. I would get it. I would be like, look, you can't, this character has been established completely. There's a whole arc. Don't muddy the waters and just bring in somebody else and give a different vibe. But it's 1 season, and we know why, or as far as like, she's leaving of her own volition. It wasn't like she was forced out. It wasn't because of some contract drama. She's leaving. So for me, 1 season in, it's far easier to just be like, put someone else in the role, let them run with it, and go from there. If it was, 4 or 5 seasons in, I would get the kind of awkwardness of maybe not being able to just fully be on board. But for me, this is not what I'm going to a Batwoman series for. I'm going to see Batwoman, and Kate Kane is not really that character. She's not that go-lucky, whatever. There's like a bunch of other characters, and I'm totally cool, by the way, of them bringing in this character into the series and making like her a part of it. And even if you want to pass the baton at some point, okay. But like, again, just as a coming from where we are with the current scenario, I don't love this. Just
really good point.
You're overcomplicating it. Just put the person in, let them run with it, and don't make it so complicated.
Yeah, I mean, as our own Russ Burlingame, who he and his kind of team are DC TV experts here at Comicbook.com, and they always have great breakdowns on all this. And he was kind of saying that this sounds like they're just mashing up Cassandra Cain's edginess and Stephanie Brown kind of like for more of the goofier side and lighthearted stuff. And like, I don't know. My only concern is I don't mind the idea, because I have to kind of stay consistent in my belief that comic books are about constant reinvention and kind of building new stuff. That is what they are, and new creative visions. So I have to kind of stay consistent with that. But the only thing I kind of got tripped up by was, this just sounds like the description of like a TV focus group character casting.
Yeah. Like,
where everybody's just like, she's goofy, but she's edgy. She's this, she's that, she's this. Oh, and she's LGBTQ, guys.
Oh my God, you need to do the introduction.
And it's just like, great. It's like everything in there. I mean, there's some like, a girl who, there's a line in here about like, she was a drug runner, dodging the GCPD, masking her pain with bad habits. A girl who would steal milk for an alley cat could also kill you with her bare hands. Like, what?
That line was a little weird. Like, that was it. Now, are we on Catwoman now? I don't know.
Yeah, for real. That's a very Catwoman line. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's like drug dealer hookers with a heart of gold, like, and a comic book collection. Like, I don't know. So it just sounds like a weird character composite. And it just sounds like basically what they're doing is a focus group was like, what does Batwoman need? And they were like, well, what if we make it more like humorous, like Supergirl, like goofy, fun for people? And and that's what they're doing. So they're just doing Batwoman with more humor.
Thought Supergirl when we first started, like, likable, messy, a little goofy, untamed, until they said drug dealer. I was like, oh, it's Supergirl.
Well, that's the Gotham City part. They were like, that's the Gotham City part. Is, in Gotham, you're all those things, but you're also slinging heroin or whatever.
And that's not any hate, by the way, on like Stephanie Brown, Cassandra Cain. I'm a giant Stephanie Brown fan, and loved her time as like Batgirl and her spoiler stuff. Like, it's great, and those characters by themselves are awesome. I don't necessarily need an amalgamation of all of them, and then with a Batwoman label. Like, to me, none of that jives. But I'm interested to see what they do.
And I'm just kind of one thing I'm just bummed about is during Crisis, and we're gonna move on. But during Crisis, like, the Kate Kane kind of what's her name? Supergirl's alter ego, Kara Danvers. Like, that whole relationship and personality mix, like, that was like the closest thing we've seen like to a really good Batman Superman kind of bond on these live action shows. Like they were great together, and I was really looking forward to seeing Ruby Rose and Melissa Benoist like kind of like do something together, like a World's Finest, because they really got that dynamic down and they were really fun. Like, and so I'm kind of bummed we're losing that altogether. But all right, let's move on. We got to keep going. Let's talk about Tiger King, because Tiger King is not done, guys. We are not done with Tiger King yet. So, yeah, the Tiger King thing is just getting started, in case you're wondering. Like, I mean, we have already talked about the multiple movies, TV shows, all this stuff that's happening. Nick Cage is in one. What's her name from Saturday Night Live?
Kate McKinnon.
Kate McKinnon is in another as Carol. So there's a lot of these going around. Here are a few updates. Okay, so first of all, the story is still evolving, which I love. The story is still ongoing. So it looks like in a move, Carol Baskin has now swooped in and seized control of Joe Exotic's zoo, which we saw in Tiger King. The whole story was how Joe Exotic had the zoo, and then it went to Jeff Lowe, the guy who came in, you know, the always wearing the biker stuff, Jeff Lowe, banging his wife and the nanny, Jeff Lowe. So, like, yeah, he was all making a big thing, and even in the Tiger King follow-up special about how this new zoo he was making and how great the GW zoo and, like, how it was going to be such this great reinvention and everything. But apparently, like, you know, Joe, excuse me, it's no surprise here that Joe Exotic had some shady dealings going on, guys, if you can believe that. And basically, he had kind of just screwed up this whole land deal, and it was accountable. Or no, he had screwed up a deal with Carol and had to pay her money for trademark infringement, you know, quite possibly from all the times he was, like, you know, shooting things from her zoo. I'm not sure on the details, but he transferred his assets over to his mother to kind of hide them. Of course, this is, you know, not a solution to anything. Eventually somebody's coming for that money. And because of that, like, Carol basically took her payment in the form of the land for his zoo. And so Jeff Lowe tried to fight this, now lost. Now Carol owns the land for the zoo. So Carol Baskin now owns Joe Exotic's land for the zoo, but as Jeff Lowe was still talking trash, even this morning, as of today, he doesn't own the tigers or any of the actual animals. She just owns the land.
The land.
Yeah. So Tiger King's still going, y'all. This is still unfolding, and yeah, this is crazy. And what brought this back on our radar for me was we got to first look at the Tiger King comic from Tidal Wave Productions. And man, Matt, we got to go through this series when it comes out.
Yes, I feel like, and it's such a weird thing because, like, because you don't want, like, we had talked about it previously where we were like, oh, we don't want to, like, glorify, you know, the, like, super caricature character that Joe Exotic is, but, like, this is insane. Like, and it's so insane, like, you just have to talk about it. Like, we definitely have to, like, go through those, because, like, this comic is not just, oh, hey, we're going, like, covering the stuff in the documentary. Like, this thing is, like, going through his past and all this.
The comic is basically, like, it's kind of a continuation of the story in the form of a double-pronged way. Like, we saw the preview pages. Some of it's a sequel. So some of it's just, like, interviews with Jeff Lowe from as soon as April of this year that they convert into a comic book kind of, like, monologue and series of panels with this very arch-looking, cartoonish Jeff Lowe and him talking trash about Joe Exotic being locked up and how happy he is. Other parts of it are prequels of, like, are going to be prequels of Joe and Carol's life before, you know, the material we saw in Tiger King. And yeah, and it's like we see this horrific scene of, like, when Joe Exotic was 5 and how he was sexually abused by a farmhand on a farm he was working on. And there's an entire kind of really intensely creepy panel of this, like, happening to him as, like, a young boy. So it's pretty raw. Like, it's pretty.
Is it true story? So this isn't like the adventures of Tiger.
No, this is more material from Tiger King. Yeah.
Okay.
It's by Michael Frizzell and Joe Paradise, and Jesse Johnson are the two artists. And it's material from Tiger King, like interviews afterwards, and material just that they had the documentarians about, Joe's story and all these things that they now convert into comic book form. So you can just read it that way. And
I totally thought this was going to be like Adventures of Tiger King and just going to be like made up storylines that are really, cartoonish and fun. And
no,
you'd be like, okay, wow.
This is like the documentary. This thing is raw. It is not for the faint of heart. It is pretty crazy. Like I said, there's an entire, you can look on Comicbook.com, and there's an entire panel of just of a horrific sexual abuse of a young boy. It's like part of the story. So, I mean, it's going to be pretty raw and it's outlandish. And what I wrote about in our article, kind of breaking this down, is how weird it is that this story is so crazy and like so larger than life that in some ways it makes more sense in a comic than it does in a documentary, because these characters are just like to
digest.
Yeah. And it just captures the absurdity of it. And like I said, the larger than lifeness of it. Like the panel with Jeff Hardy is him talking about how good it is to like have Joe in prison, but it's drawn in a way. So it's like, if you look at it, he's in the background with the people filming him talking, and in the foreground it's just a tiger like just tearing apart this piece of meat. And it's like a perfect little emphasis for how this guy is. And it's just like I said, so the artists and the writers are kind of smart and sly about how to kind of tell this story, but also, kind of either when to be subversive and when to be kind of empathetic. And it's kind of interesting. So we're going to be checking this thing out. I say all that.
Who knew that the comic would end up being way more revealing, I should say,
intense,
as the special episode. That bonus episode that they did was like garbage.
Oh, I know.
Compared to
this,
RuPaul's
like this
Drag
Race, like when the ladies all meet up and talk about each other.
Oh, the reunion specials on almost any reality show are 10 times better than most of the actual episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
So, in this case, very much.
Oh, yeah. They get heated. I love that stuff. But all right, so that's what's going on the Tiger King front. This is going to keep popping up, because as long as we are starved for content and this thing keeps unfolding, we are going to be talking about this for a while. So, yeah. All right, next we're going to move on and get into our deep dive. And the first thing we're kind of going to touch on, let's take a break first, because, we got to pay some bills, and this seems like a good time for a break. So let's take a break. Then when we come back, we're going to get into our deep dive where we talk about Rick and Morty, Space Force, what's going on in comics with Moon Knight, and some good vibe stuff to kind of send you guys out. All right, so jumping into our deep dive, Rick and Morty has wrapped season 4, and we've been talking about the series kind of intermittently as it's been going on. We talked about kind of some of the highs, some of the lows, some of the awesome classics like the Vat of Acid episode. But with the season 4 finale, fans finally, the showrunners, and I love Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon for just like what assholes they are sometimes, but they finally gave fans the thing they wanted, which was the kind of next step in the serialized canon stuff of the show. They picked up a major storyline that they haven't really touched since the beginning of season 3, which was like 15 timelines ago. And it basically had to do with, and a lot of the other kind of lingering mysteries from season 3 they did everything but Evil Morty. So sorry, Evil Morty fans, we still don't know about that, and the Citadel of Ricks, but they did the whole kind of lingering feud between Rick, the Galactic Federation. They finally answered the mystery of the clone Beth mystery from the end of season 3 of whether, Rick's daughter Beth, did he clone her, or was she still the original one? And we kind of pushed that and a bunch of other storylines with Bird Person and Tammy. And if you know Rick and Morty, you know what I'm talking about. All these storylines forward. And for as much as they seem to really kind of have been grinding their teeth this season, Roiland and Harmon, about having to be forced into the mold of doing like serialized canon and all that stuff, they really actually do know how to put on like a really epic, good, action-packed serialized episode. There were a lot of jokes in this. There were some jokes in this one about how they were just kind of forcing themselves to do a Star Wars and how much they kind of hated that, but that's what it was. And so like Clone Beth comes out back, and you find out like one of the Beths went into space and became this crazy bounty, like, you know, freedom fighter, like fighting the Galactic Federation. And she comes back, but the Federation follows her and then threatens to blow up Earth. And then it causes all these problems with Rick and then the both Beths turn on him because like normal family Beth and clone Beth kind of unite and kind of turn on him. Summer and Morty just get an arc that they just keep referring to like as their arc for the episode because they need something to do. And so they learn to be a better brother and sister while fighting over this invisible belt. It's like crazy. Yeah. And like the highlights, of course, are like, yeah, Tammy. They finally settled this whole thing with Tammy, who used to be Summer's best friend, and turned out to be a galactic agent who killed Bird Person, Rick's best friend. Bird Person is resurrected as Phoenix Person, the cyborg version. They have the epic fight with Rick that is like probably one of the series' best fights. Yeah, but in the end, it all ends. I say all that to say with at the end of every Rick and Morty like season, there's always this kind of meta commentary on like what has changed in the show over the season and like where that leaves us for next season. And in this one, it's kind of more serious and sad that Rick kind of loses control of his family. Both Beths turn on him, like I said. The kids just think he's a POS, and Jerry even gets like some licks in on him, and they're just like, and so he's all alone. He has Bird Person locked in a cage in kind of his cabinet in kind of a Walking Dead zombie situation where he's trying to like bring him back, and he's just like a freaking out. And so he's just kind of all alone. It was kind of one of the more darker, nihilistic ends for Rick and Morty, but that happens every other season. Every odd season ends on this kind of manic note of like Rick freaking out about how the next season's going to be awesome and he's just going to do whatever he wants and it's going to be these crazy monologues. And then every even number season ends on him like in some dark, depressing place. So it's like a manic depression thing. I don't know. Yeah, season 2 ended with him being locked in Galactic Federation jail because he found out his family, he was, you know, basically making them implode. And so he just gave himself up and let himself be caught and locked in jail. But of course, in season 3, that turned out to be a ploy and he destroyed the entire Galactic Federation. So there you go. And that was why season 3 ended with like this monologue about how it was going to be crazy. But yeah, and so this one ends with him just all alone in the garage, having kind of alienated the family. So looking back over it, Rick and Morty season 4 was pretty good. It was pretty good. There were some things that were better than season 3, some things that I think we'll need to digest over more time. But this was one hell of a finale, and hopefully season 5 isn't like 15 years away because I don't know if we're banking that money that will be here, baby. So let's just try to get it sooner before later. All right, let's go on, and we're going to talk about Netflix's Space Force. Janelle was like all psyched to get into this today. Like she kind of was like doing a Miss Cleo. I was going to press play on Netflix to start this series, and I get this like very excited Janelle message. It's just like, "Oh my god, you watch Space Force?" And I was like, "I'm about to now." Yeah,
we had like a little mini quarantine watch party.
Yeah, like it was good, but yeah, so Space Force is the new Netflix series by a lot of the people who made a lot of the funny shows you like, and starring a lot of people from a lot of funny shows you like Veep, Parks and Rec, The Office, you know, that kind of crowd of ironic sight humor, kind of workplace comedies, and or political comedies. And it is about, obviously, the new branch of the military that was established under the current administration, which is Space Force, which...
So great.
Yeah, and the show basically, you know, Space Force is this weird evolving concept of us basically militarizing space that is still kind of vague and unclear about like what it is we're doing.
It has a flag.
Yeah, it has a flag. They have official uniforms. They look like, I mean, everybody's been ragging on how they're ripping off Star Trek for all of this. Like, there's a lot of jokes. And so this series, I mean, it looks at that, but it's kind of, again, like The Office and looked at kind of the absurd monotony of corporate office life and existence and all that stuff like that. Parks and Rec was about kind of the absurd monotony of kind of governmental process and bureaucracy. This is about kind of the absurdity and process of kind of the military and government military relationship and like what that's all about and kind of, yeah, kind of running towards these ideas, even in show of like force and stuff like that, even if we don't know what the actual thing we're doing is. And
Her
how
episode
kind of,
was with the like chimp in space.
yeah, I only did the first 2, and so the first one is, of course, introducing like what it is, and Steve Carell is this commander who gets put in charge of Space Force, and the second episode is them trying to repair a satellite that's been damaged by a foreign satellite coming in and like taking out these little robotic arms and snapping off their thing in this really like petty way.
It's such a jerk.
It's China, right?
Yeah, it's China.
It was
and
China?
so they have to try to use the two animals that they have in space, which is a monkey and a dog, to try to fix this. And it's a whole episode dedicated to them trying to convince this monkey to fix the shuttle.
They have to like go out.
Yeah, into space and do a spacewalk.
It's so funny.
And that
Meanwhile,
one is really
the scientists, we should know that the relationship between like the military aspect and then the scientists in charge is something really awesome to watch too.
Yeah, and John Malkovich is the scientist.
They're just so good.
So it's like him and Steve Carell are kind of going at it all the time, and it's really funny. And Ben Schwartz, John Raffio from Parks and Rec is like the PR guy, and nobody does that kind of like nerdy scumbag douche like guy quite like him, and he's so funny. Like, yeah, but
should be sending a tweet about this.
Yeah, Netflix kind of allows these guys to kind of play it a little bit deeper than they usually do, and I can see why people don't necessarily get like Space Force and immediately fall in love with it. The first episode, it took me a minute, and I had to watch it because I was distracted the first time, so I had to go back and kind of rewatch some of the things that kind of popped up because I was so confused. And then I realized it is confusing because there are mysteries they drop in like that you're not expecting, like that scene with Lisa Kudrow suddenly. And we're just gonna talk like it's hard to say spoilers for any of this because it's not really spoiler, but there's just a scene
the whole
where
show,
her character like changes very drastically from like when you meet her to like when she shows back up in a later scene. And that's what made me rewind and go, whoa, like what am I missing?
You do feel like you miss a whole segment of the show with that, and then you're like, no, that's purposeful.
And then so it shows up these mysteries that you have to that are slowly unpacking over the course of the show. And it takes a minute in the first episode, but like once it clicks into what kind of humor you're looking at and like what the real kind of gag of it is, and there are so many, and like every single frame does have like a lot of humor and jokes and from the visual to the dialogue in it, it's pretty enjoyable. Like, and I liked it. And the second episode is very funny with just Steve Carell kind of playing it straight as this very rigid military guy who stinks through sheer force of will and like just kind of, get it done-itness. Like he could convince a monkey to kind of repair a shuttle. And this whole setup and premise is just great. And what the monkey's like negotiating.
All his scientists are like behind him trying to figure out something else, like an actual option to fix this satellite.
I think that's the thing that surprised me most about the show is that, as a giant Office fan and even as a giant, like I do love that his version, like his general is like this weird off-brand Gru. Like the voice it's like this weird middle ground. Like he sounds like Gru a little, like because he adds some like little snarl to his delivery and stuff like that. So that takes a minute.
He does.
But
I didn't even think about that.
Oh yeah, totally. Like he totally
oh my
does.
Gosh.
Like, so like at times when he's talking and giving like speeches, especially like in the high school and stuff, it sounds like Gru is up there like trying to convince all these people to join Space Force. But like the way he approaches the character is surprising. I think that's to me the most jarring thing when you start watching it is that he's not inherently funny. He's not trying to like, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like Michael Scott's always like trying to be funny and things like that. And he's not. He's very rigid.
He's a straight man in this.
Like, he's very much that. But it's and that's the thing too that's kind of interesting is that he's also right a lot more than you would assume. You would assume he's going to play this kind of buffoonish general, and really he's like the guy that gets it done most of the time. Like it's actually like there's a great line towards the end of the first episode where he's talking to John Malkovich, and he's like, I saw the umbrella, and like, you're never going to get anything done with that kind of fear. And like that's a great line, and he even points that out, and he does that through several times in those first two episodes. And I think that's the thing that
and I think
really
you're nailing
is jarring.
something that we should probably highlight before we move on, which is I feel like a lot of people this show will split because, you know, obviously the intensely dynamite charged level of difference in
Yeah.
politics right now in our society will make people think, oh, this is just making fun of this, and it is. But it's not. It's actually kind of a deeper show. Like that scene you're talking about with Malkovich at the end of the first episode. It really does. The point of that scene is kind of that, you know, it is a relationship, right? To get things done and to kind of progress, especially in America, like it's always a relationship. The scientist was too neurotic. The umbrella thing Matt's referencing is he saw one of the scientists where they were going to do this test launch was carrying an umbrella because it might rain that day. And he kind of assessed that this guy was going to be too scared and too neurotic to kind of just go for it and, you know, not wait for the perfect exact time to launch this rocket and just kind of, you know, do what they had to do to get it up and get it done, where he pushes them and they all think it's going to go disastrously, but it works out. And then the scientist, John Malkovich at the end, is like, how did you know that this would work? And he was like, you know, I didn't, but I saw that guy with the umbrella and I knew that we would never get this done with that kind of thinking. Like you gotta have brave. So it's a relationship between, you know, that military fortitude and the scientific analysis and the different parts that got to kind of come together to get these big things done. Like it is a relationship, and, you know, we need each other is kind of the thing that it's kind of under the underlying point of it all is.
Yeah. So, like the concept gets punched a couple of times, like by people within the military of like, oh my God, that's like a joke or whatever. But
like the evil military branch, like the one that you're rooting against. I always thought when the story started that we were going to be rooting against Space Force because of the whole like premise and like where it's coming from. Exactly. But then you start to kind of go, well, they're the underdog. And I kind of want them to like excel because they could do something really great.
They're not the constant punching bag.
Yeah. The character kind of like when he got assigned to it to begin with, he was kind of like, like he thought it was a joke. And then when he got assigned it, he's like, well, then I'm going to take it serious. And it's funny because he thought it was a joke too. And then it turns out it's real.
Yeah. And you end up rooting for him and this crew. So yeah, it's very much, it's not the paint by numbers parody that I feel some will go into it expecting. You know, and some of the best gags are just like Carell just doing weird things like his constant march running. Like, are you running?
Roy Wood Jr. Roy Wood Jr. is really funny.
Oh my God, he's so good.
But because even though the orders, it has a lot to do with people trying to reasonably fit into orders that are so crazy that like just getting their head around the orders and how to execute them is part of the show too. And there's a lot of jokes about that. For the real people who have to hear things like we're building Space Force, like what does that mean? Like what do you do with that? So check it out on Netflix. Let us know what you think. We're gonna be moving on to comics real quick. I don't know how many comics Matt has this week, or if we have comics this week. Who knows? But I think everybody's on a pause right now, or I don't know. But anyway,
yeah. I mean, we do have comics. It's a smaller amount this week.
Well, let's just start with what we were talking about. You mentioned last week. And Avengers is running this new storyline called is Age of Country, right? Like, yeah. And I checked that out, and I thought it was interesting. I thought we should just touch on that real quick because this was a good one to talk about. Because Moon Knight is coming to the MCU. We've had a lot of Moon Knight conversations. There's a lot of Moon Knight stands in this crew. And now Moon Knight's kind of turning out to be kind of a D in the Marvel Universe. He's going around, and he's pulling a Baron Mordo from the movies, and he's stealing kind of the abilities of several key people in the Marvel Universe. And this is all at the behest of the god he works for, Khonshu, who apparently needs Moon Knight to do this to prevent some kind of oncoming apocalypse. So, yeah, he in this first thing, he takes out Iron Fist.
Which is one of the coolest, I think, sequences. Yeah, he takes out Iron Fist.
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, Doctor Strange.
He gets the Eye of Agamotto. Oh man, I'm blanking. Who else? Is
Black Panther. That fight will come next issue, but they do kind of. There is this like overwhelming, like, oh my God, there's an army of mummies. And pharaohs.
Mjolnir.
Okay, I need to get
Thor.
in on this.
Yeah, and he takes out Thor.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, in like this awesome way. So basically what Age of Khonshu is doing is delving into Mark Spector's the mystical aspects that he serves, which come up in different ways in the series. But now there's this prime directive from Khonshu that he needs to prevent some kind of calamity, and basically he's going to need these powers, all of these powers, to kind of do it. And so he's collecting powers that are in some kind of way related to the moon, which is really interesting. And there's all these kind of things about how when he goes to fight each of these people, he's talking to them and kind of telling them and explaining their relationship to why Khonshu, and like Mjolnir is like the best one.
So
like,
good.
He kind of schools Thor on like not understanding what his hammer is and like what the Uru metal that it's made from is, and he basically says it's like moon metal, so therefore it's under Khonshu's jurisdiction. And so he beats Thor with Mjolnir, which is crazy. And so like, yeah. And what's interesting about this and what I liked about this first issue is, and I've read it really fast, so I'm kind of unclear because I haven't checked in on Moon Knight like recently. Are these, and so I had a question for you, Matt, are these, each fight he's in a different form of, there's a different form of Moon Knight. Are these separate personalities, or are these just Mark Spector in different phases of his kind of identities and personalities?
So that is actually something that is, I feel like, is a purposeful misdirect. We aren't sure.
Okay.
What it seems like is that for like each fight, he is kind of reaching into a different bag of tricks. And so he does kind of adopt a different form to fight that person. But his personalities are more tied to like, like Jake Lockley and like people, and his mannerisms change, his like manner of speech, and like his aggression changes too, depending on who he is. So those stay relatively consistent throughout the whole issue. So I think it's just a visual thing. I don't think
there are different times the fights took place. And different kind of,
It was cool to see Mr. Knight. That was
Mr.
awesome.
Knight was there, the full Moon Knight, and then like his kind of kung fu warrior dude that he fights Iron Fist, which was my favorite.
Yeah, that was
and
awesome.
Their conversation, because he's so polite and he's like not a bad guy. He's just like,
right.
I need the Iron Fist, and he's like, okay, well I'm here. He's like, no, you misunderstand. Like, no, I need the Iron Fist. Like, I'm taking your power. I need this. And so like, yeah. So these crossover things get really, they can go be hit or miss. But Age of Khonshu, the start was really good. I thought this was really interesting, and it's really interesting how they're kind of spinning all this Marvel mythology back towards Moon Knight, who is a character who has often been overlooked in Marvel at different periods. He gets lost in the waves, then he pops back up because you can't keep a good Moon Knight down, but Marvel's Batman down. But this is kind of one of the more interesting things, and I'm looking forward now to seeing how they expand the mythology of Khonshu and his influence in the Marvel universe, and how important or not of a god he is in mythology. And it seems like he's getting a much bigger kind of role in Mythos reveal. So we're gonna be keeping our eyes on that one, because that was a good read.
I think one of the coolest things that Jason Aaron does, and because Jason Aaron did the same thing, ironically, with Thor, with when he went and essentially reworked and also added in and expanded all of Thor's mythos in a huge way. I mean, Jane Foster's Thor is all under Aaron's, kind of era, and what he added and expanded upon, he's doing the same thing with Moon Knight. And that's like one of the coolest things, that like when Iron Fist approaches Moon Knight, it's very much in a like, oh, I know you. Like, it's a snap your fingers, as Kevin Hart says, like a snap your fingers, like, oh, I know you. Hey, we should have teamed up by now. And like a lot. Like he's regarded as kind of like this fanatical dude that like you kind of team up with if you have to, but he's always kind of on the outskirts. And like Doctor Strange kind of has the same demeanor towards him. Black Panther is a little different. But Thor is very much the same thing. Like, he kind of talks to him like an afterthought. And that's the kind of thing that like Mark Spector is always so lost in his own craziness sometimes, and his own personalities, and he's always in his own head
Dude, my
so
favorites are
much.
scenes of him talking to himself and Khonshu, just
Right.
like sitting in a
Yeah.
room by himself.
And like they're like, I love those like and like where they would have all, you know, his personalities and then Kanchi just all like talking around a table or like sitting there debating stuff. So if you like take that out and you go like, if Spectre was ever just solely focused and didn't have all that stuff to kind of deal with, like this is what the dude could do. And the Thor scene is the best thing because he beats him up with his own hammer. He literally calls like all the moons of like from across the universe to converge on one place. Like it's really.
Oh, I forgot about
really
that
cool.
small detail. He imprisons him, doesn't he?
Yeah, in a series of moons, and pones them with his hammer because, of course, yeah, he doesn't. Again, like these powerful heroes, and Doctor Strange, it happens too. These powerful heroes sometimes get lost in their own ego a little bit, and they get lost in their own abilities, and you have to kind of ground them with someone who doesn't think on that level. He's lost in his own stuff. So when he can expand, he kind of pulls them down to earth. It's interesting to see Aaron dissect that. And I'm very curious to see like what the threat is and also what else he can add. You know, oh, he also jacks Ghost Rider's car.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Robbie
charges.
Reyes. He jacks his hot rod. Like that was really cool.
What?
Yeah, that wasn't that Mr. Knight?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Just
Oh my
that was a great
God.
scene.
down the street.
Yeah,
So good.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
great.
that's a great one. Just pulling a Grand Theft Auto. All right, so we're going to be keeping our eye on Avengers: Age of Khonshu, one of many crossovers happening this summer that we'll probably be talking to you guys about. Moving on, let's end the show. We're going to soak in some good vibes, like I said. So we're going to go back. The world is kind of really divided and violent and crazy and in upheaval. So we thought we'd try to just share some memories about times that were really good that had to do with geekdom or fandom, and times you felt like things had really come together under that umbrella and it really meant something to you. So I'll kick it off, and mine's kind of broad, but when I was really thinking of all the little specific moments, I kind of reached one. I found I had like a lot of them pooling into one place, and that turns out to be the year 1990. The year was 1999. And the 1999 year movies really kind of changed my life in a big way. And there were so many happy memories that I found like contained under that one year of that bubble. And people have done lots of writing and look backs about this and kind of like asking, is 1999 possibly like the best year in movies ever? You'll find a lot of articles on that. And it is quite possibly, yes. I was a senior in high school, dating myself. Not dating myself in high school. I am now dating myself by saying that. Jeez.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah, I'm old, but yeah, I was a senior in high school, and that was a year that I realized things had changed, and it did change. Blockbuster movies kind of entered that new phase that we are in. Like a lot of times people had genres of movies they liked. They had stars they liked and saw. You went to see a Stallone movie, or you liked sci-fi, or you did this. But 1999 is where movies became so big that they became just like global phenomenons that really became the focus of the zeitgeist. We're talking like this was the year of The Matrix, Fight Club, American Beauty, The Phantom Menace, like, oh man, Varsity Blues, The Mummy, The Sixth Sense, Office Space, Boondock Saints, Blair Witch, Eyes Wide Shut, The Iron Giant, Deep Blue Sea, Mr. Ripley, Being John Malkovich, Virgin Suicides, The Wood, Wild Wild West for Matt, Never Been Kissed, Galaxy Quest.
Oh, Galaxy Quest.
Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
So good.
Deuce Bigalow, Entrapment, The Thomas Crown Affair, Three Kings.
Man.
So why this was so important to me was just taking a handful of those. The Matrix, Star Wars, The Sixth Sense. I went to a high school that is very small. It's almost like a private school size, and it's very much a microcosm. There's a lot of different people there, like a heavily Jewish community. We had problems that year with white nationalists invading our school. My mom set up an FBI sting in our school to kind of look into that. That's a whole separate story. But one thing that was interesting is we were all leaving high school, and I saw like everybody in my high school kind of unite over talking about movies because we had nothing to do. We go to lunch, we sit out on this place called the Tombs. We were seniors, we were leaving, we didn't care. But everybody started kind of uniting and having these mass discussions about The Matrix or about Star Wars, or later when we were just hanging out in summer, we talk about the craziness of the Sixth Sense and that twist and everything, and everybody just was always talking, or Deep Blue Sea and Sam Jackson and what happened. Was Blair Witch real? You know, all these conversations that began. Fight Club blew people's minds. American Pie came out, so we had these in Varsity Blues. And so we actually had these moments where we all went to our town theater together. We all were there to see Star Wars. We were all there to see American Pie. We were all there to see Varsity Blues and cheer, and we snuck in beers and did all that. And we had these huge moments together, and we would talk about them all the time at school. And it really kind of clicked something in my head that, you know, what the power of fandom was. And it sparked this little idea in my head at the time, that you could make stuff that brought people together and fans to just discuss movies. Like that it didn't have to be all about insider knowledge or celebrity interviews, that you could legit just make a place of fans talking about fan stuff, talking with other fans about fan stuff, and that it would be a kind of real kind of hit in things, because people love to do that more so than we've ever thought. And ironically enough, that is what sparked me the idea to kind of get into this industry and join with a bunch of other people I knew and writers and stuff, and start a site that would kind of, you know, cater to that idea. And we successfully did that, and it caught on. And I'm just happy to be in a world now that we helped push that along. And we now have so many of these sites where fans gather and can, you know, enjoy their own power as fans and express themselves and build stuff for themselves. And I really love that. And so that's kind of why I do, not to get too deep with you guys, but that's what I do, and why I love doing this. And even doing this podcast with these two crazy people and talking to you about all this stuff, because that's where it came from. It actually came from a place for me of seeing people come together where I'd seen in a time much like this, where I was in, like I said, a school where we were looking at, you know, people who were trying to incite violence and division, and this thing bringing people together really kind of impacted me and changed my life. So I'm glad for the year 1999. So that's my story. Janelle and Matt, why don't you guys hit us with something that's nice and some good vibes for the fandom, and we'll get out of here.
Janelle, why don't you go?
Okay. So
and the pressure's on, because you're like the good vibe ambassador. So like, make us all feel good.
I do have to say that, like, for me, only child, kind of left out, similar, like I was in a very small school for most of my life, or for the beginnings of my childhood. I was kind of the poor kid and made fun of for that and things like that. So I was very alone a lot. So for me, like getting my first console, my first gaming console, is what completely took me away from kind of the bullying and things like that I was undergoing. And it took me into a whole nother world. So my nerdom starts in gaming for sure. And so when I got my first Super Nintendo specifically, I loved it so much. And because of that, I found one friend, because there was only 2 controllers that could play with me and play games with me, even though most of the games are one player. And specifically Donkey Kong Country 2. That's my first game I ever really played. So I love it. And fast forward to being an adult, when they actually released Donkey Kong Country Returns, I lost my mind, because it helped me escape like some tough times. And I loved it so much. And then also the launch of the N64, because that took me from one friend to 3 friends, because you could plug in 4 controllers and play together.
Get that golden eye.
I mean, seriously, I was the kid who had the consoles. And though, like, you know, I was a girl, and I was like the only one of my friends that was a girl and had all the consoles at my house. I had the Super Nintendo. I then had the 64. I had the GameCube. And it even pushed me into college. Like I was living in a 4-bedroom apartment in college, and a huge hurricane came in. I was in Florida. Everyone lost their power except for us. And we literally had 40 people sleeping on our floors and playing my consoles from my childhood. And it was just such a development to see that I started kind of playing by myself. And then I eventually like provided all this entertainment for tons of people. And that's been really, that would probably be my favorite memories, is just playing all of these awesome games. And P.S., if anybody wants to tweet me about your favorite video game, I love to talk video games anytime. But yeah, gaming is it for me, for sure. Yeah. definitely from the start. Super
Matt,
Nintendo forward.
you better close this out. And you better make it powerful.
Okay, well, okay. I don't know about powerful.
Pressure.
What I will say, and it's probably no surprise, one of mine is actually tight. And it's actually good that we hit movies, we hit games, and now we're gonna hit comics. One of my something, and I was kind of like Janelle, I'm an only child, and for me, I bounced around a lot. Like for a while there, I was at a different school every year.
Oh my God.
We really got to do psych tests in this hiring process. I was at a different school. If they did, I'd never be here.
I was at a different school every year. 1 year was actually in 2 different schools. And like, so you kind of learn to like, you know, compartmentalize. Like you'll make a friend, you'll make 2 friends maybe, but then you know you're going to leave. So it's hard to kind of get adjusted. And when I came to Nashville, first thing you find for me anyway is when I move to a new place, I find a Chinese restaurant because I need Chinese food. And then I find a comic store. A comic store. Those are 2 spots. I always find one. And so I found one here and I actually got involved there with they were doing like an art class. So I did that. And then they were like, hey, every Wednesday, new books release. And we have like a couple of us just like come here, we'll sit at the store and we'll just talk about new comics. And then we'll sometimes go to dinner and stuff like that. And I was like, they invited me to come along. So I came along. I knew one person. It was like 8 of them. And so it's like intimidating a little bit. And, you have some people who have been reading comics like since it seems they were 5 and others just started. But that group, I learned so much. And we used to do it every Wednesday. Every Wednesday I was there. We were there for a couple hours and then we would go eat and we would just talk about comics, the industry, and then you just start talking about your lives and you start relating to these people on a personal level as opposed to just like, talking about Green Lantern or whatever. And it was over the course of years, I've made so many friends from that. And it became such a kind of part of my weekly life that I look forward to. It was just a joyous thing just to talk with people. And honestly, it was also talking with people who were enthusiastic about comics. Social media can be very cynical a lot of times, especially about any industry, but comics especially. It's always easy to find the negative. And that's also part of the reason why I don't really talk about books that I don't like, is that there's a lot of books that I don't like, but I don't talk about them because I remember what that was like, just talking about the things you enjoy and talking about things that bring brightness to your day. And it didn't make any sense to hover around the negative. We talked about some of that stuff, but it was small. And I love that enthusiasm about a genre. And I love that about comics. And that's why to this day, that some of that stuff still sticks with me. Stuff I learned, stuff that people recommended to me. I would recommend stuff. It was just like you always felt like you were learning and growing, both as a fan of a medium and also as a person. And so that has always stuck with me. And one of these days, I don't get to go anymore, really, just because of work and time and things like that. But whenever I get the chance, I try. And it's always a rewarding experience. So I would suggest, if you ever go to a comic store when things kind of get to a point where we're normal, again, and there isn't like this, threat, it's one of those things I would definitely suggest if you're looking for a community. You find the right one, it can be a very rewarding thing. And also, there is a very much that we just started a D&D group with some of the guys at Comic Book. And that same enthusiasm, that same love and imagination can very much be found in tabletop and role-playing as well. So if you're looking for a community, there are some out there, and they can be very rewarding experiences for the rest of your life.
Okay, I was with you to the end. The D&D thing, you lost me, but I was with you on the.
You should try it. It would be very interesting.
Oh, I've been there, buddy. I have been in the McDonald's doing that. Awesome. We'll talk about that. But good thing. I like how you brought it all around to don't hover around the negative aspects and talk about indulge in the things you love. All right, that's a good way to end. That'll do it for this episode of Comic Book Nation. We want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you were looking for a safe haven to be in, I hope we can provide one as a distraction from quarantine, social tensions, personal stuff, everything that's going on in this wonderful year of our Lord 2020. We put up new episodes every Wednesday and every Friday on Comicbook.com, where you can find a subscription to our RSS feed and get regular updates about the show, or you can subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Google Playlist. You can tell your Amazon Alexa device to fire up Comic Book Nation podcast, or you can see our smiling faces on the Comicbook.com YouTube page. If you want to chime in on anything we talk about, drop topics, or just say hello, you can hit us up at the hashtag Comic Book Nation, or you can find me at Kofi Outlaw.
You can find me at Janelle Wheeler. And also, I just want to give a huge shout out. Compendium number 4 of The Walking Dead was sent to me off my Amazon wish list by a podcast listener. So thank you so much for that. I'm so excited.
That's
Bruce,
awesome.
Amazing. Yes. Okay. And where can they find you, Matt?
You can find me at Matt Aguilar CB.
Awesome. All right, that'll do it. One day we will be back in the studio. And when we do, like I said, we're doing T-shirt-orama, baby. Janelle's sporting one right now if you're watching. They are great T-shirts. I'm just doing the regular CB, not branding enough. But we will be sending out a whole bunch. So go on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. And when we get back, we are going to go through all these quarantine 5-star reviews, and we're going to give a bunch of people some T-shirts, so be sure to leave those reviews. Thank you again for tuning in for Comic Book Nation. You guys stay safe out there, stay sane, stay healthy, check in with us if you need to, just to say what's up, and we hope to see you next time. Peace.
Peace.